Welcome to Men Among Kings, a Stephen King two-screen retrospective series right here on your podcast network of choice. I'm your host with the most, JJ Gordon.
I'm Phil. They all float Godell.
Pictures up. You need to talk like into this. Yeah, like.
Oh.
There we go.
This is a little bit different.
Yeah, you see how that like.
Yeah.
The mic thing is.
I'm Phil. They all float Godell.
Oh, they all float.
They all float.
Well, it's the morning after It Chapter 2 was released. Phil and I went to it last night. It is a lengthy film.
It's 2.5 hours at least.
I want to say it's more. I mean, we got out just before midnight and it started at 8:30.
8:35 was the screening time, but I looked at my clock. It was about 8:50 when the movie actually started.
So I would say this thing's a solid 3 hours long.
Invest 3 hours of your time for sure.
So, well, let's get into this. If you haven't listened to our breakdown of the first It from 2017, you're going to want to go back and rewatch that. Yeah. This is not a movie where you could hop in without having seen the first.
You would be a little lost. I mean,
You think just a little lost?
You'd be very lost.
I don't think that you would get any enjoyment out of this movie if you hadn't seen the first.
I think you would, but you would be doing yourself a grave misservice to skip the first one and go right into the second one.
I just don't think like you wouldn't understand half of the jokes, the references. Yeah. You wouldn't understand.
Well, that's a good point.
You know, this movie starts with people just getting calls to come home, and then you wouldn't understand why it's a big deal that they come home.
Yeah.
So a big part of this movie is the dealing with repressed trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So these kids who leave Derry, everyone except for Mike leaves Derry, and they don't remember anything that's going on.
Yeah.
So part of this movie is figuring out those memories, and they don't. What I love is some of them are not hit over the head with you. You know, they could do everything in flashback, but they create new flashback sequences.
Yeah.
That kind of fill out more of the original movie as well as different pieces. And we mentioned this on the first It podcast, which is this is not a sequel. It's a continuation of the story. Yeah. Now, technically, it's a second movie in a series.
Yep.
But you alluded to it's like a
Mockingjay, Deathly Hallows.
It's something that, like, the story is already there. We're just seeing the second half of it. In fact,
unless you want a movie that is exactly like 5 to 6 hours long, you kind of need to split it up into two.
Right, and they did a genius thing, in my opinion, which is they took a book that goes back and forth through time a lot, talking when they're kids and then when they're adults, when they're kids, when they're adults. And they said, listen, we're going to segregate all of the kid stuff to the first movie and tell essentially the origin of the friendship between these children. And then the second one is we'll get the band back together.
Yeah.
As it goes on.
And I was actually very pleased because there were some like little things in the first one that I was like, oh, they didn't kind of mention this. And in this chapter 2, I didn't expect them to have so much of them as kids again. It's not, there's not a huge amount. It's not like half the movie, but there's plenty of flashbacks of them as kids and as friends. Still
significant enough where you feel like the kids had trailers on the set, right? And I know they did some digital de-aging on some of the kids.
Oh yeah.
So again, we mentioned this in our first It podcast. So if you need to go to the bathroom or something, this is a perfect time. Just let your phone keep playing. But they did not film this immediately after It.
No.
They weren't in a perfect world. They would have been filming both of these movies at the same time.
Yep.
They would have wrapped on the first one and immediately jumped into the second, so that the kids maintained a similar look, a similar voice,
same height.
There were a couple times when I noted that the voices changed a little bit, and
I noticed it too.
In the face too. There were a couple times where you could really see that they're trying to play down their age in the face. So
because they didn't start filming this second one until after the first one was actually released.
Right. In fact, I mean, and depending on where you look online, you can find differing things about like, oh, well, the second one's written and we're ready to go, or no, the first one's such a huge success that now we're writing the sequel, or there were all these pieces. I have to believe that the director who returns for a second time with this to tell the whole story,
and thank goodness,
right, always wanted to make both of these to tell the whole story of Stephen King's It.
But I bet the studio was kind of like, let's see how the first one
we're
is.
going to give you X amount of dollars, and we'll see how you do with the first one.
Yeah.
The second one, again, released in September. And so...
Today, technically.
And remember what I told you about the release dates is if you add up the release date, like 9/6/2019, 2019, you end up with 27.
27, yeah.
Which 27 seems to be this little weird revolving thing.
Yeah.
Well, before we get too far into this, Phil, would you give us a plot for It Chapter 2?
Now, full disclosure, I look up a lot of summaries and I kind of spruce it up a little bit. So there's no summaries for It Chapter 2 out there yet.
Oh, no one went home and wrote one?
No, I didn't. I wanted some sleep before coming here early in the morning. So most of this is just off of my memory from last night. So we open up with there is a carnival going on, and there's a gay couple that's kind of hanging out there, being intimate with not intimate, but they're being affectionate with each other, and there are some bullies that don't like it, and so they attack this gay couple, and they beat them up severely. It's very brutal to watch, and Adrian Mellon, the character that dies, gets dumped over the bridge. By the way, spoiler alert, just in case you haven't seen It Chapter 2 yet.
By the way, if you haven't seen It Chapter 2, you should listen to this afterwards.
Yeah. So, he's in the river, and It reappears and kills Adrian. He might have survived, because he was alive when It pulls him out of the river.
He saves him to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. Which kicks off its life again, I guess. Mike sees it and sees a message that says, come home, come home, come home. So It is calling them out. Mike Hanlon is the only one that has stayed in Derry. Everybody else has moved away. Mike calls all of them, and you get this great sequence of different, how they look in the future. Bill is a screenwriter for movie or book to screen. So kind of like what Stephen King is now, which is similar in the book. Beverly, you don't see what she does. Ben is some kind of like an architect type person, but he's like the main guy. Stan, you don't see what he does. Stan commits suicide right after the phone call. Everybody else just reacts very badly. Richie is a stand-up comedian. Eddie is an analyst for an insurance company to see if things are a threat or something like that. They all go back to Derry. They meet, they have lunch, and they start talking, and they don't remember. They know that this is bad because obviously they have bad reactions, but they don't remember what happened. Mike reveals what happened and what it is. And after they hear that, they're like, why did you tell us to come back? If you would have told us, we wouldn't have come back. They find out that Stan had committed suicide, and most of them decide, hey, we're going to leave. We don't want to do this. Mike talks to Bill, and they go back to the library, and Mike talks about this ritual of Chud, or Chud, I forget how he pronounced it, and that's what they could do to defeat it, and that if Bill is on board, everybody else will get on board. They all kind of meet again, and to make this ritual work, Mike tells them they got to go get a trinket, something that kind of represents their childhood or something like that. So they all split up, and they each go get their own little trinket. Beverly gets that card that has the poem that Ben wrote on it, but she still thinks that it's Bill. Bill finds Silver, his old bike. He also has everybody also gets an interaction with it while they're doing this. Bill also finds Georgie's boat. Ben doesn't do anything, apparently, it seems. Eddie gets a refill of his prescription, his inhaler. Richie gets a quarter from the arcade that he used to play in. And it's alluded that Richie is gay, but they don't straight out say it. Who am I forgetting? Anybody? Nothing? That's good.
I think you're good.
All right. So they each have they each get their token, and they're going to go defeat it. In the meantime, Henry Bowers, who has survived falling down that well, we all assumed he would because we all are somewhat familiar with the story. He gets an interaction with it too, and he gets his knife back, and he sees the ghoul of Patrick Hochstetter, and he heads out. He escapes. He heads out to try to kill the Losers Club. They have an interaction with Henry. Henry stabs Eddie in the face, and they fight him off. They stab him, and he runs off. I forget, how does... Oh, yeah. Henry comes back over at the library just before they go have their last... They try to go take care of it, and Henry attacks Mike in the library, and Richie kills him with an axe. So then they all go back to the house on Neibolt Street after Bill tries to save a kid and can't. And they go down into the sewer again, and they find the hiding place where it was, and they have an encounter with it again. They go down into this lower chamber where when Mike is talking about the ritual of Chud, he says that Native Americans figured out this ritual to defeat it, and that he came down from the sky on an asteroid. And the chamber that they go to, it looks like the remnants of where that asteroid hit, that it's underneath everything, this cavern. They encounter it. They try to do this ritual, but it kind of taunts them and says, Mike, you didn't tell them that the ritual didn't work the first time. Dun-dun-dun. And so they all kind of get separated again. They all have kind of like these visions and are like mentally attacked by it again. They all get back together after kind of one by one kind of defeating their visions. And Eddie, who is very scared still, was given a fence poker thing and was told by Beverly, hey, it will kill monsters if you believe it. And so he hurls this thing at it, and it looks like it kills it. And it doesn't. It then like stabs him with one of... It now looks like a giant spider with the Pennywise face. And it stabs Eddie, fatally. And so they're all trying to decide, well, how do we kill it? Because this poker didn't kill it. They're all trying to flee because they think that if they could get it into an enclosed space, it will take the size and not be something giant that they can't defeat. They can't get there, but then they realize, well, we can make it smaller through our will alone. Once again, kind of alluding to the ritual of Chud, a battle of wills. And then they all start like taunting it and like kind of showing that they're not scared. It shrivels down into just like a clown puddle, where they all reach in, grab its heart, and then just squish its heart, killing it. It kind of turns to dust, and then the whole chamber starts to collapse. They try to bring Eddie, but Eddie's dead, and so they have to leave him behind. And they escape. They come out of the house, and the whole house just collapses right behind them. After that, it kind of like jumps forward just a little bit amount of time, and Bill is back home writing. Mike calls him up and says, hey, they allude to, hey, why do we still remember everything? Last time we forgot everything. And Mike says maybe it's because we killed it. And before Stan committed suicide, he had written everybody a letter. And that letter is read. And it says that, hey, guys, I'm sorry, this technically isn't suicide. I know I can't come back. But I know that you need to kill it, because otherwise you will die too. So I did the smartest thing, is I removed myself from the board. That way you all can be together and defeat it, which is why he took his own life, because he knew he wasn't going to go back, and you needed all of them there to do it. Beverly and Ben end up together. Richie looks like recarves into this wooden post that he did as a kid, that, you know, R plus E, alluding that he loved Eddie as a kid and once again as an adult. And Bill just can write again and is successful. Mike decides finally to, I'm going to leave Derry. Get out of here. And that's the end. I might have missed a little bit here or there. I just saw it.
We might re-record that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, we'll wait until the plot synopsis comes out.
That would be good.
It's funny, though, because you brought up, like, 3 things. I'm like, oh, yeah, that did happen in the movie, didn't it?
Yeah.
It just sounds so more cohesive when you've got that piece to go off of.
It does.
So, but that's fine. We'll just keep going from here. Well, let's start out with this. So, first and foremost, starting the modern age, the 27 years later, we end up with 2 characters that we've never met before. In fact, a whole slew of characters we've never met before. The current town bullies and this
Adrian Mellon,
this young gay couple.
Yeah.
And Adrian is not from Derry.
No.
He is there with his boyfriend,
who is from Derry.
And at first you don't know, like, okay, so it's this carnival, some clown imagery right off the bat. He gets a hat that says I Heart Dairy that has a beaver's tail and a beaver's teeth. I guess beaver is a big part of chapter 2.
Yeah. In the first one, they make mention that this was originally a beaver trapping community.
Oh, yeah, they do. And they call her Beaverly instead of Beverly. So, I guess the town mascot is beavers. I don't know if most towns have a mascot.
Yeah.
But Derry for sure does, and it's a beaver.
Yep.
So you instantly get the feeling, and tell me if you agree with this, Phil, that times have changed outside of Derry.
Yeah.
But Derry is very much the same, especially in the way that they interact with this homosexual couple.
Oh, yeah. I know that there is still homophobia and people doing horrible hate crime type stuff out in the world still today, but it is significantly less than what it was back in the 80s when this originally takes place in the book. So when that happens in the book, which that is directly from the book, the gay couple getting attacked and everything, it's a little more aware of the times, whereas nowadays, yeah, you see that, but it is in a significantly less, people won't stand for that.
Right.
People passing by would
The majority
stop.
of people are awesome individuals, and then there's a couple of jerks who ruin it for everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I thought this is a very powerful way to start off the second film. Like I said, it alludes to the fact that things in Derry are still the same, but the world outside of Derry has changed, which our main characters have also changed pretty significantly. It's Mike because he's the black guy. Yeah. Right? So with this, the way that they treat him right off the bat, I think is interesting because he sees the, like, come home, that Pennywise has written in blood on the side of the bridge.
And it's all kind of floating.
And it like, he shows fear, but it's more like he's been waiting for this. Yeah. Mike's life has been an obsession with it. Yeah. And this is leading up, these are the moments it's leading up. And then you get this great sequence of calling everybody else. In In the Attic, I think is the name of the movie that Bill, a book of his that's been adapted.
Something like that.
When Peter Bogdanovich shows up as himself as the director of this schlocky horror film that is based on Bill's book, I really get a kick out of. And a real nice Stephen King reference with you suck at endings.
Yeah.
This it's funny because this follows throughout the whole movie about this. You suck at endings. And these endings suck. And I kind of feel like they're alluding to the fact of like, hey guys, we're doing our best. We're trying really hard to get a great movie here, but the ending might suck.
Yeah.
Let's talk right off the bat about the cast.
Sure.
Okay. Jessica Chastain as adult Beverly, really dig her.
Spot on.
You can tell that they decided to beef up her role because Beverly has a lot of screen time in this movie.
A lot. And being the only woman in the cast, like legitimate woman in the cast, I definitely understand that.
Right.
What's her name? Audra?
Yep.
Bill's wife gets just a very little bit of screen time right at the beginning, more or less just to say, hey, Bill is married.
And in the miniseries, in the book, Audra's got a much bigger role.
Yeah.
In what goes on. We see her in a 3-minute long scene, and then we never see her again.
She's an actress on the movie that...
Bill is played by James McAvoy. Now, full disclosure, I'm not a James McAvoy fan to begin with, and I don't think he brings anything to this role.
Aside from the fact that he looks a lot like the...
Right. The casting of the adults to the kids, amazing.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to imagine they cast the children with an idea of who's going to play them.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, when they interviewed the kids originally, they said, who should play you in the sequel? And Sophia Lillis said Jessica Chastain, and Finn Wolfhard said Bill Hader. And so those are the only two that came true out of that.
Although I feel like, that was like, I think almost everybody thought that Jessica Chastain
was going to play.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. Amy Adams.
Yeah, that's true.
Another redhead. Bill Hader plays adult Richie, and in my opinion, this is Bill Hader's movie. He, I think, is one of the most likable characters here, where you really feel for him.
It's very authentic.
He goes through the biggest journey, I think, of everybody. At the very beginning of this, we find out that Beverly is with an abusive husband, so shadows of her past right there.
Yep.
And she leaves her wedding ring as she rushes out of the house. So you have the feeling like that part of her life is done. She's left her husband.
And that's the end of that character, too, in the movie. It's like she just left him.
Just leaves him. It's good for her.
His name is Tom, by the way.
Tom and Bev.
Yeah, I don't think that they even mention that in the movie, but...
Yeah, she keeps saying, like, honey.
Yeah.
But Bill Hader, I think, shines in this movie start to finish. I think he just...
As a
and it's amazing because you're introduced to him by him throwing up.
Yeah.
In one of those most believable puking scenes I've ever seen in my life.
He throws up a couple times in this movie, each one very authentic. And being a comedic actor like Bill Hader is, he does a great job looking scared and determined, and then still have that comedic soul of his.
He is able to find humor in things that, like, he brings brightness and a levity to moments that are really deep and dark. Isaiah Mustafa plays Mike Hanlon. I think he's fine. He reminds me, his speech pattern reminds me of the guy from the miniseries.
Yeah.
They kind of talk a lot like this, and it's important that you do it just like this.
Considering the fact that in the book, Mike becomes the librarian, they don't straight out say he's the librarian, but he lives in the library, like above in the attic of the library. Yeah, so you kind of assume that he's the librarian, because otherwise how else is he going to get in there? But they don't straight out say in the movie, hey, he's the librarian. And considering that he was a farmer beforehand, he still has that gruff, hey, I'm a farmer feel in the movie.
It feels a little flip-flop because
it does.
Ben is the one who spends all the time in the library and is the researcher in the first one. And so I kind of feel like this is an opportunity that they should have taken to maybe change that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because in the book, Mike is the one who's got the information. He's the one who knows about Old Derry, and he's got all the stories. And so they gave all of that to Ben. Well, then you should have given Ben this arc to be the one who stays in Derry, especially because he's sort of the new kid. So you can see all of those, you see all the kids leave their hometown. Mm-hmm. This is not Ben's hometown, so it could make sense that this is where he decides he's going to finally put down roots somewhere.
That being said, I am happy that they didn't do that because that would have been a big departure from the book.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of big departures. Let's face it. At this point, the book was a loose bullet point guide for where they were going to go with this. James Ranson plays Eddie. I thought he was fantastic. He, I think, matches the acting style and the vocal abilities most of the.
What else have we seen him in though?
That's a good question. So Sinister, he was in the Sinister series, movie series. Let's see. Tough Love, Family Blood. Looks like he's. He was in The Clapper. Did you ever see that?
No.
Oh god, it's a hilarious movie about a guy who's always in the background of like infomercials.
He and Ben and Mike are the no names really, and Stan. But Stan commits suicide at the beginning of the movie, so you don't really see Stan.
Sure, yeah.
So, they're the lesser knowns of the cast.
They're not the matinee idols.
Yep.
In this. And then Andy Bean plays Stanley Uris, who you don't get to see much of. It's
right at the beginning and toward the end.
And they nail Stanley by just getting the hair right, that curl in the hair. And then Jay Ryan plays Ben. Now, one of my favorite parts of this whole movie is the reveal of Ben. Uh-huh. So Ben Haskam is, as Phil put it in the first time we talked about it, is a tubster. So he goes. The flashback to the future is they're all getting these phone calls, and you see like Haskam and Associates, architects, and there's an argument in this big boardroom about whether or not they should have walls in this, and there is a chubby, sweaty-looking adult who's kind of explaining these things. And you just assume it's Ben. The whole audience assumes this is future Ben, and
because
he's chubby.
If they would have cast him as Ben, it would have been like, hey, this kid looks like this adult.
Right. Well, then it cuts to a Skype session, and you actually see the real Ben, who is now incredibly successful. He's very handsome, chiseled abs. In fact, they find a great way to be able to pull up his shirt later and show off his abs.
Yeah.
I think one of the best parts of this movie is that reveal. Yeah. Because the whole audience fell for it.
I knew better. Even just knowing casting and trailers and stuff, I knew better.
See, and I thought... Because they show him in part of the trailer, right? Yeah. So you know it's not going to be it, but it still is a great way to kind of...
It fooled me. Even though I knew better, it fooled me.
So they all do a fine job for what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. My biggest complaint with this is they put a clock on it. So the reason they all get together is the fact that Jessica Chastain has already seen all of their deaths when she was in the Deadlights, which, by the way, they don't mention it all in the first one, but now all of a sudden they've got this phrase that they all know and share. So apparently we did not get to see that part of the round robin discussion. At the end, it was like, did you guys see the Deadlights? But she has seen all of their deaths, so she knew Stanley had killed himself. She just sort of was waiting for it to happen. And they know that if they don't stop it on this particular cycle,
they will die
before the next time comes around. And they have a chance to stop it. Now, so there's urgency, right? So they're all in this town. This whole movie takes place in less than 48 hours. Yeah. Whereas the first movie takes place over the span of almost a full year, start to finish.
The movie?
The first movie, because Georgie's attacked in October.
Oh, yeah.
Finish it up in September.
Yeah.
So that I think is felt jarring to me.
Yeah.
But now, of course, they're adults. They've got lives in other places. They don't have the ability to come home for an entire summer.
Yeah. Now, Mike does mention that, Adrian Mellon was the one, but he did say that there were other people that were missing. So he kind of alludes that the Adrian Mellon incident is what, even though that's supposed to kick it off, Mike mentions other people have gone missing. So maybe there was a little bit of lapse between the Adrian Mellon thing and him calling. They just don't really delve into that or really make it significant.
There is not, because they're at the carnival, and there's no way that this carnival has gone on for multiple months.
I know.
Unless Adrian Mellon was attacked at the last day of Canal Days, and this is the next year's Canal Days.
No.
But they're all still wearing those beaver hats.
Yep. Or his is those days he gets attacked at the very first one, and then this is like the end of the week where it's Canal Days is a week long.
But
I don't know.
Aren't we to assume that it comes out for a whole year to feed?
And he
comes out
does
of hibernation, for that. So
yep, it comes out for 12 to 16 months.
The fact that we're having this conversation of the timeline is part of one of the reasons I go meh.
Yeah.
Because by putting that thing on, if we don't stop them, we're going to do this. Nobody's talking about, I've got to get back to my real life. They just want to get out of Derry.
Yeah.
So, I also want to say, the score has some really out-of-place moments.
Mm-hmm.
Some things that actually took me out of, watching the movie. Specifically, when Bill is looking at Silver for the whole first time, he sees his old bike in the antique store window. There's an odd, weird feeling score that takes place, and I didn't care for it.
I don't remember.
It came up several times.
The only one that I remember that was just very out of place was Eddie, when he goes into the basement of the pharmacy and he's encountering the weird leper, and the leper throws up all over him. They suddenly cut to Angel of the Morning by the Pretenders, I want to say. And it was just very weird that would be the choice, just out of the blue.
I like what he played with the soundtrack in the first one, which is having those little pieces, the New Kids on the Block music, stuff like that. This one did come out of nowhere. Also, they made Beverly smoke a lot. I don't remember her smoking once in the first but in this one, she's got a cigarette all the time.
Yeah, she does, and she smokes in the book too. But when she's waiting for the losers to show up to help clean her bathroom, she has a cigarette, and then she goes over the edge, and then she throws it. I remember that. But that's the only time that you ever see her smoke.
And in this, it's it's a character piece for her.
Yeah, she's always got a cigarette.
Every time they go back to young Beverly, she's smoking. They're all staying at a bed and breakfast, the Derry Town Hall Inn, which apparently does not have any employees because they come and go. They treat it just like a house.
Yeah.
So much so that Beverly helps herself to a drink at the bar.
Yeah.
Just goes behind it and does whatever she wants. So surprises in this movie. One of the first things that I was surprised at right off the bat is you see this sequence of the sewer being flooded, and it floods out all of the body parts of these children that it had collected into its lair, and then all of a sudden
Henry pops up.
Henry Bowers pops up.
Yep.
And so my first thought was oh my god, did Henry Bowers gets caught in a time loop? And this is we're now back in 2016. But that's not the case.
No.
Is you have this flashback for Henry Bowers to the 1980s. You find out he ends up going he gets arrested for the murder of his dad. He's in the loony bin.
Yeah.
And the guy who plays adult Henry Bowers looks surprisingly like young Henry Bowers.
Yeah.
With that mullet. They make two allusions to Meg Ryan in this movie that I don't understand. Maybe he's got he's a big fan. The director's a big fan of Meg Ryan, but the Adrian at first says you need to, or Meg Ryan called. She wants her haircut back.
Yeah.
And then there's a poster for You've Got Mail when they're
That's
inside,
true.
when Richie goes inside the now closed Capitol Theater. And so I know that there's probably homages to like other Stephen King work in this, but I thought the Meg Ryan thing was odd. Also, and I only saw it once, and they showed a picture of it, and then they never went back to it. But when Ben has his vision as a kid of it attacking him, so it takes
when they had all separated, and after the attack at the Niebolt Street house,
and they get into the fight, and then so it's the several months during the summer where they're not friends, and you assume that school's back in session by the time they take on it the second time.
But it's not. It's summer school.
Is it summer school?
Yeah, there's a thing that says summer school sessions. So I caught that because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wait a second, and I was like, oh wait, it said summer school.
So Ben's at summer school, and they show the slide, and the slide says, the great horned dragon, and there's a piece of artwork up there. I'm pretty sure it's the same artwork from Red Dragon, the Thomas Harris novel, that the Tooth Fairy is obsessed with and thinks is making him do things. And so I don't know. Like I said, I couldn't find anything to back it up online. Nobody else has talked about it yet. Hopefully at some point somebody does.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it's an allusion to Red Dragon, which is awesome because I love the movie Red Dragon. I love Red Dragon more than I love Manhunter. Richie gets what as an adult, one of the more interesting Pennywise attacks.
Mm-hmm.
He's in a park, and he sees a statue of Paul Bunyan, and it reminds him as a kid, again after they had split apart, and they're vulnerable individually.
Because the movie plays out that it says that, hey, we weren't all together that entire summer when they had split, and so then you see everybody's encounter with it as a kid, and then once again when they're adults, and it's kind of a parallel both times.
And in this particular instance, I found it to be very intriguing because we have a Paul Bunyan statue not too far from us, in Fargo, North Dakota, up in Brainerd, Minnesota. When that Paul Bunyan statue comes to life, it is freaky.
Yep, and that's as Richie as a child.
And then when Richie as an adult looks at it, you really find out that it plays upon your fears, but not just your fears of, the bugs. He gets deep into your psyche. Mm-hmm. And so in this, he's talking about Richie's secret, his big secret, which is that Richie's gay.
Yeah.
And it's obviously something that he has kept hidden and he's closeted. And that the fear that Richie has of not being of being outed is like I felt the hair on my the hair on my skin just stand up straight. That to me was one of the most terrifying moments, is the fact that he's so deep into what your real fears are and like the root of those fears.
Yeah.
That he can, and the power that someone can have over another human being like that. Mm-hmm. I thought that was, and some great acting by Bill Hader, some amazing acting.
The sequences that every adult has, and as kids, when they encounter it, were nearly as horrifying as when in the first movie when they first encounter it. There's some very jump scary moments and just freaky out. They're not as powerful as in the first movie, but my goodness, like when Beverly is in her old apartment and has that interaction with the weird woman, is just when she kind of becomes it, and just it's freaky. The Paul Bunyan thing is just awfully horrifying. There's some really good jump scares.
This movie's all about jump scares.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's coming.
Yep. They cut the audio from the soundtrack. It just becomes this thing where like what's going on, and then it's
Yeah. Other movies, they try to get you with the, hey, you don't expect something, and then something jumps out at you, and it feels cheap.
Right.
Whereas this one, you know it's coming. You know it, and it still gets you. And the visuals of some of that stuff, like the Paul Bunyan statue, is just, it gets you, and it's freaky.
I will say there is some stuff in here which is cheap. You know, like
a little bit.
Ben locking himself in his locker. I'm like, oh boy, what's gonna be behind Ben in his locker with him?
Yeah. The poster behind him though, that weird poster of a guy just looking.
Wasn't it?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't recognize the guy because I wasn't a huge New Kids on the Block fan. Oh. But yeah, there's a guy just kind of hanging out, and I was like, is that going to look at him something or move?
Is it going to jump out? That would have been nice. You get one of the New Kids on the Block to jump out and attack them.
But instead, it was just Pennywise.
The CGI in this movie could have used a little bit of work. Specifically, there's a sequence in the Chinese restaurant where they're opening fortune cookies, and the things that come out of these fortune cookies are scary. I mean, they are weird. Yeah. Like, you know, terrifying little things that come out. But the CGI on them, in my opinion, is so bad. Yep. That I just got lost in it. Like, for example, the things that come out of the fortune cookies don't frighten me, but the heads floating in the fish tank that are singing, that was scary to me. Yeah. And there's so much that you could have done with physical effects in this movie that it's funny because the miniseries was limited by physical effects. That spider at the end looked awful. But this is limited by its non-use of physical effects. Yeah.
There was some good stuff in there too, like the Paul Bunyan, but like when Ben is thinking when he's in summer school and believes he's talking to Beverly, and it turns out that it's when she kind of like turns on fire, and
when she goes Ghost Rider.
Yeah, she goes all Ghost Rider, and it looks a little hokey.
Yeah, I think.
But then when she's chasing him, it kind of has the same feel as that
the headless boy.
The headless boy, and it's just creepy.
And you know, let her take off her head or something like that. Yeah. You know? Because it's clearly somebody who's a stuntman running, and then they're just CGing the face. And that, even during the end battle, I thought the CG could have been better. Yeah. I think this movie got rushed, right? And so they want to make...
Probably a little bit.
And it probably cost a lot more because you've actually got name actors and actresses who probably have a much higher salary cap. And because of that, you can't spend as much money in other places. So let's say the first movie...
You can't refine it as well.
Let's say the first movie cost $50 million to make. This movie should have cost $200 million to make. Because you really need to amp that up, and you need to continue with the visuals. Bill Skarsgård gives a great performance as Pennywise.
Once again.
One of my favorite sequences in this is when Pennywise attacks a little girl under the bleachers because they play with light. Light is the terrifying aspect of this. She's following a little lightning bug, and Pennywise plays to the fact that, you know, she immediately says, like, I don't want to talk like, you're scary. I'm not supposed to talk to you. Like, this is weird. We're under the bleachers. And I think, well, good. That's written how it should be, because that's how a little girl would react at that point. Yep. And the way he plays on her emotions about a birthmark that she has on her face, and he has this lightning bug. He doesn't smash it. He's holding it, and he's only allowing a little bit of light to
illuminate
shine on his face. To me, that was such a strong choice, and that is one of the more terrifying moments of that entire piece.
Oh yeah. There's some goods. There's definitely some great stuff about this movie too. Yeah. The whole sequence when Beverly is in that apartment and then turns around and you actually see the real Bill Skarsgård, and he's putting makeup. You've seen it in the trailer where there's just a little bit of makeup and then he's bleeding and he's like, whoa. It's just creepy. And yeah, he does a great job as Pennywise.
The first trailer with that extended sequence of Jessica Chastain inside the old woman's house, Mrs. Kirsch's house. This was a part that freaked me. I don't think anyone saw coming the attack that comes out of there, and that was intense. So now, is the whole thing fake because she goes out later and the apartment's all like decrepit? So like this old woman didn't have a dad who was in the circus.
Nope.
Like that's not real at all. Like
there was no Mrs. Kirsch.
Okay.
She went into to her it did not seem like an abandoned building, but it was.
It was. So the choices that get made in this movie to propel the story forward are fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when everyone's looking for their tokens and the things that they're going to sacrifice to the fire at the end, I think we were kind of taken for a loop on something. Like at one point, Bill gets his bike back and the bike plays a much bigger role in this. Like you never knew he had such a connection to this bike in the first movie. In the book, you definitely know.
Oh yeah,
Silver is a huge part of it.
Yep.
But in this, I get the feeling that, like, I was like, how are they going to burn the bike?
Yeah, but it wasn't. He somehow, because when he encounters it in the sewer, or from that sewer grate where Georgie originally disappeared, somehow he got the boat.
Yep, I didn't care for that.
Yeah.
I was like, so you got your token because it gave it to you?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't seem right.
I know.
Does it?
It doesn't.
You know, like, I would have liked to have seen him go back and get a token of Georgie's. You know, something that belonged to Georgie.
In the book, and I don't want to jump too far until we actually get to the page-to-screen stuff, but they don't. They do split up and encounter it when they're exploring Derry, but they do that to try to regain their memories, not to find a token.
They do an interesting job with the set decorating of Derry, which is they don't pretend like this town was never evolved anyway. Mm-hmm. So when they go to the Chinese restaurant, it's like in a strip mall.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's neon and it looks fresh and it doesn't look like an old rundown Chinese restaurant. When they go to the downtown area, the shops it looks like a lot of the shops are still open. The pharmacy that Eddie used to go to, Keen's Pharmacy, is still open. And
Keen is still there.
Keen is still there.
And that one bully girl, you see the obvious adult version of her. Right. I thought that was a great, yeah.
But things like the small movie theater downtown closed.
Yeah.
Like probably the single screen or dual screen movie theater downtown closed because they opened a mall somewhere that had a big Cineplex.
Sure.
I thought that was a little bit of, you know, like calling out modern movie culture. The fact that the small town movie theater couldn't make it anymore.
Yeah.
And then they show on the marquee again A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, which is the Dream Child. It's weird.
But that was the flashback when they're looking at themselves in the mirror.
But like, what's the point of showing us the marquee again? They're really hitting on the fact that A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 was playing at this time in September of 1989.
Yep.
Now, Phil, you'll get into this. So they've got Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and Rampage in the arcade of this small town movie theater, and you see it both in 1989 as well as today. That's where Bill goes to get his token. Literally,
Richie does.
Richie, yeah. When he literally gets a token. My understanding is, like Mortal Kombat didn't come out until like 1992. So that did not fit in the video game section there.
Whoopsie.
Yeah, I don't know when Rampage came out. That might have been an 80s game.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, you brought up, let's talk about some changes from page to screen.
So, the death of Adrian Mellon is accurate, and that's exactly how it's like it eats a big chunk out of him, and he dies. There's a little bit more time that goes on comparatively. So in this movie, it looks like, hey, Adrian Mellon's dead. I'm gonna go call people. Similar to the death of Georgie, to when they actually battle it, there's comparatively about the same amount of time in the book before Mike really, really wants to know whether it is actually back or not. And it takes him a while to finally get up the nerve to call everybody. In the book, those couple characters that are kind of throwaway in this movie are gone. So Audra becomes an important part in the book because she follows Bill. Tom, who is Beverly Marsh's husband, he wants to kill Beverly for leaving, and he follows and then becomes, a lackey of it and kidnaps Audra and takes Audra down to the sewers and stuff. Their professions are a little bit different. Beverly Marsh, they don't even mention what she does, but she's a fashion designer. Eddie Kasprak runs a limousine rental company in the book. Richie is a shock jock, so kind of like who's a shock jock?
Like a Howard Stern.
Yeah, like Howard Stern. So he's not a comedian, but he's kind of a comedian. He's like a Howard Stern type person. Stan is an accountant. Mike is the librarian, so that's kind of similar. They are very accurate with the death of Stan, but in the book, there's no letter that he writes. It does give it a little bit more levity in the movie of why he does, but in the book, it's just the horror of he knows he can't stand to face it again, so he just outs himself. So the movie gives it a little bit more of an uplifting death instead of just, hey, you're dead, which in the horror aspect of it, it's worse that he just killed himself. So like I mentioned before, in the book, they do spread out and go explore Derry, but only to jog their memory because they still can't quite remember everything. And so they don't go find tokens, but they each experience it again. Eddie run into Belch Huggins as a leper, which is one of the lackeys at one of Henry's lackeys. Yep. Beverly, once again, just like in the movie, encounters the weird witch woman in the apartment. Ben sees Dracula, and Bill, once again, same in the movie, he finds his Schwinn. He finds silver, and he brings it with.
Which, by the way, we should also mention Stephen King's cameo in this is running the antique store where Bill buys it, and he does his best version of Judd from Pet Sematary.
A little bit, or maybe he's just talking. Maybe that's how he just actually talks.
I've heard him in many interviews. He's really leaning into that main accent, though.
Yeah. Henry Bowers is in a mental asylum, just like in this movie. Although he gets his knife back from Belch, I believe, in the book. He escapes, and what ends up happening is Henry first attacks Eddie, like in the movie, but he doesn't stab him in the face. He breaks his arm again. So Eddie has a broken arm both times they encounter it for the final battle. Then he goes and tries to take on Mike and then is killed there. Audra becomes catatonic when she first encounters it. Tom drops dead from fright. So now Audra's just down in the sewers hanging out. Mike does not join them because he was horribly attacked by Henry. And so he doesn't he doesn't go down in the sewers with them all, but they all do. Eddie does die. They do perform the ritual of Chud, which they actually mention in this movie now. So I was kind of excited that they actually mentioned it. But the way that they do it is a little bit different. Once again, Bill, this time with Richie, they enter the Macroverse to encounter it, but they're losing because the giant turtle, Maturin, is dead in the book.
So, and that's a huge thing too.
Yeah.
There's a giant turtle who apparently threw up and formed our universe.
Yeah.
Who is really the guiding force for the kid.
He helps Bill as a child to defeat it. And in this one, when Bill sees that the turtle is dead, like despairs. And so then Richie comes in and he helps out. But they're still not powerful enough to kill it or to defeat it in the ritual. So when Eddie sees that, he takes his aspirator and he kind of distracts it, spraying it and everything like that. I should mention that in the movie, it's kind of alluded to it, but its true form is light. It's the deadlights. So its form as a giant spider with a clown face, that's still not its true form. Its form is light.
What it reminds me of is like a projection, right?
Yeah.
So if you're using a projector and you try and touch what's on the screen, it's not really there.
Yeah.
It's the light bulb creating this image.
Which is why the battle of wills to defeat it is significant, because you can't, if its true form is not physical, how are you going to defeat it? So Richie distracts it, and then it kills Eddie by ripping off his arm, and then he exsanguinates, dies from loss of blood. So Eddie still does die. But now, once they defeat it, and once again, it retreats, and then they follow this time. They see that it's laid eggs. Ben destroys all the eggs while Beverly and Bill, they go to try to, and Richie go to finish it, and then they destroy its heart, or so they think anyway.
One part of this movie that I just didn't care for is, so I think of it kind of like a wild animal, right? Mm-hmm. So it's feeding, right? It hibernates. When it is getting backed into a corner here by them taking its power away by making it small, making it feel small.
In the movie.
Yeah, they're making it feel bullied. You're a bully. You're a clown. You're a small clown.
You're a mummy.
Essentially like pushing it back. When you back an animal into the corner, that's when it's getting to like its most. That's when I would have loved to have seen like it kind of swing for the fences as far as like what these horrors, were.
Yeah.
We already saw him become Georgie to try and trick Bill in the first movie, and then again, in the second movie. So I would have liked to have seen, like kind of flashing through all of these things again. And it kind of does. Like, you get the flute lady at one point, even though Stan's not even there.
Yeah.
But like sort of that animal backed into a corner. I would have liked to have seen more than that, other than him just become sort of a pancake, deflated puddle.
Yeah. So they have Audra. They find Audra, and she's in a catatonic state, and they try to bring both her and Eddie out, but they have to leave Eddie behind, and he's dead. So it's like they feel bad, but they have to leave him behind. So they get Audra out. At the same time that all this is happening, this huge storm is destroying Derry above them. So it's kind of like, hey, this big battle causes a storm.
Hurricane,
kind of like a hurricane, and destroys downtown. And that's actually how they get out, is that, a chunk of downtown collapses. And so it like opens, a way for them to get out of the sewers and everything. At the end of the book, they start to forget again. This time, Mike, too. And Audra's still in a catatonic state. Everybody's, slowly they're dispersing and everything. Bill takes a long time before he actually leaves Derry, but even Mike is forgetting stuff. In fact, they even like make mention, what was wrong with Eddie? He has asthma, he has an inhaler, but they I think it was something else. And so they can't remember Eddie. It's actually kind of heartbreaking as the way that it's written. Seeing them forget each other, it's very sad. Ben and Beverly do end up together at the end, and the very last bit of the book, Bill has Silver, and he makes mention, you could beat the devil with this bike, And so he puts Audra on the bike and he bikes down this hill, and there's something about it that it wakes Audra up. And so in a way there's a little bit of a happy ending because now Audra's out of her catatonic state and is with Bill. And that's the end of the book. But it's sad because everybody's forgetting everything.
I think that there's a good thing there, though, right?
It is.
You know, you don't want some. I had bad dreams last night after watching this movie.
Yeah. Well,
So
and they make
you don't want to hold that. Like, it's overcoming that trauma.
Yeah. And they do make mention. It's like, well, Ben mentions to Beverly, well, do you really want to forget everything? And she goes, I remember being scared, Beverly says. And he goes, yeah, but there's some stuff that you want to remember. And that's the part of the book that you feel sad about, is that, yeah, they're forgetting all the horror of it, but they're also forgetting the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. There's a love triangle that takes place between Ben, Bill, and Bev in this movie that I don't know why this always makes me uncomfortable, but like, I mean, Bill kissed Bev. Bill's still married.
Yep.
Do you think Bill told his wife about that little kiss?
Probably not, but you never see Audra again in the movie anyway. So.
Right, and she kind of comes off as sort of a little brass.
Yeah.
Too, you know, like, you had all this time to write. I told him, I vouched for you to be on this thing.
Whereas in the book, it's like they are a married couple and they do love each other. I believe in the book, and I'd have to double check it, but I believe Bill and Beverly actually have sex.
Oh, yeah?
As adults,
More,
yeah.
I was going to say as adults, because we all know that as kids. Thank God they continued to cut that out of the story.
I was curious because when they have some of those flashbacks of them finding the clubhouse in the Barrens, which I'm glad that they have in there, because it does show that, yes, the Barrens was their hangout, their hideout. I was curious whether they would flash back and show that, yes, they all had sex in the sewer when they were kids. But they kept it out. They kept it out. And I understand why they took out Tom and Audra from the movie, because at nearly 3 hours already, adding 2 more characters that you have to kind of deal with would have just added another half hour.
Right. And we get the idea that Tom is a jerk and that Beverly is still living in a life of abuse.
Yeah. And same thing with the turtle. By adding the turtle, you would have just added a lot more time.
Yep. And we get plenty of allusions to it. I think this movie winks at the people who read the book.
Yeah.
And so they know what's going on. While at the same time, it still is 100% worthwhile for those individuals who just want to watch the movie for the first time. And
if you did love the TV series back in 1990 and both movies, reading it's definitely well worth the read. It is like we said before, it is a long book, and there's a lot of parts where you just kind of like, you know, there's a lot of character development in the book. But it is so good. I wouldn't have read it 3 times if I did not think it was a great book.
So the temptation here will be to make a third one. I think this movie is going to be a big hit. From the looks of the theater last night and the fact that I know even people who don't like the horror genre. And by the way, I think this movie steps out of the horror genre.
Oh, yeah.
I think it becomes more fantasy. I think it's closer to like a sci-fi movie. I mean, you know, sure, there are scares and everything like that. But
there's a great visual of seeing Stanley as a kid, his head turning into like a weird spider that they battle, and oof.
Yeah, and so to me, it's just it's different. It doesn't feel like your horror. It doesn't feel like Scream 2, Scream 3.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, because legitimately, it's like it is a horror movie, but there's something about it that feels so different. Even though this second movie is definitely weaker than the first.
Oh, without a doubt. If you had to tell me which one are you going to watch on loop for the next 100 years, I would say the first one without a doubt.
But you would definitely want to spatter in the second one just to get the complete story.
Right. It's all right.
Yeah.
It's good. It's all right. It's not nearly what the first one was. I can tell that they switched cinematographers from it, because the things that seem so epic and grand as a kid, you don't really get until I think one of the sequences when Bill is on Silver for the first time is the first time I feel like there's a sweeping aspect of it. And just knowing how to shoot certain things, the funhouse sequence when they're in the mirrored hall, I thought was kind of cheap. I thought that, like we all know what's going to go on here, right? Like he's not going to be able to get to this kid. All in all, I guess, Phil, yay or nay for It Chapter 2?
I would definitely say a yay, but partially because the first one, if that first one was not as grand, it would have been kind of a so-so, but it's definitely a yay for me, just not as strong as a yay as the first one.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's something that I think people are going to see. I think they're still going to enjoy. I just think that it made me want to watch the first one again.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make me wonder whether they will try to mine this, because I mean they know that it has been around for millions of years,
right? And
so you could do a prequel.
This movie does end.
Yeah,
like, their story finishes,
and
there's no allusion to the fact that there's something laying around, that there's still something there.
This is definitely the end of the Losers Club story, which is why it is done. But there is some talk of, we could do a prequel. Technically, if you want to get super technical, in one of Stephen King's later books, Dreamcatcher, it does take place in the same area. It doesn't have anything to do with it, but it is in the Derry area. And one of the characters is like snowmobiling around or something and sees this statue. One thing in the book, when they're coming out of the sewers as adult, a photographer takes that picture and that gets the front page of the newspaper. And there's this huge statue that was dedicated from all the losers. So it kind of says that, hey, the losers did make a monument to all the kids that died in this storm and everything. And underneath a statue written in something red says Pennywise lives. So it does make allusion that, yeah, they defeated it, but they didn't kill it. So technically they could potentially do another sequel, but it'd be another 27 years in the future.
Right. I hope that they don't. And if you did a prequel, I feel like the risk would say we'll go back to when the Native Americans took on this entity, and I
hope they don't.
Yeah, I think that it wraps itself up really nice. I love the fact that there's a Stephen King universe and things exist within that universe.
Yeah.
And so just explore it, and you can allude to it. It's like that thing that happened in Derry.
Yeah.
Just be done with it at that point.
Also, one other thing, just because it is so grand as a novel in my mind, in the book 11/22/63, the main character who time travels back to try to stop the JFK assassination, he goes to Derry at one point and he encounters Bev and Richie playing.
Really?
Yeah. And they make mention in it in this book, in 11/22/63, that they know that he is not right, which just kind of adds to the power of the group, that the seven of them had this unity, this power of seven. So yeah, interesting that they in the Stephen King universe it keeps popping up in ways.
Well, we'll continue with this. I think the miniseries is next for us, right?
I think so.
We'll just do it all as one, right? We don't need to do night.
No. Just one giant thing.
Fantastic.
And I've already kind of mentioned a bunch of the page to screen, so I'll mention just a little bit of that too. But it might not be as huge.
The miniseries includes things that the movies choose not to.
Indeed, and actually, the miniseries is a little bit more faithful to the book in some aspects. In more aspects, I should say, than these movies did. But, these new ones are still really good. And the changes that they make are mostly appropriate.
All right. This is your host with the most, JJ, saying so long.
And this is Phil. We'll see you next time.
You're listening to Men Among Kings.